The premium cabin glowed under warm, honeyed lights, the kind that softened hard edges and made polished surfaces look forgiving. Leather breathed a clean, expensive smell into the aisle. The air held a faint trace of roasted coffee and citrus sanitizer, layered over the steady mechanical hum that never fully left an aircraft, even while it sat still. Michael Reynolds stood in the aisle with posture so precise it looked trained into his bones. His uniform was immaculate, every seam flat, every button aligned. His smile was practiced, polite, and empty at the same time, as if it belonged to the job more than to him. He angled his shoulders to block the path beside seat 3A, turning the narrow aisle into a quiet checkpoint. "Sir," he said, voice low but sharpened at the edge, "this premium section is reserved for our established business travelers. I need you to collect your things and move to the economy section immediately." Immediately. The word landed with weight, not like urgency, but like ownership. Andre Wilson looked up from his newspaper without hurry. His expression was calm in a way that did not ask permission. He didn't flinch, didn't perform surprise. He simply met Michael's eyes, steady and clear, like he had been here before. "I have a confirmed reservation for seat 3A, Andre said. "I paid for this seat. I am not moving." The cabin around them had been filled with small, tidy sounds. A zipper closing, a laptop lid clicking shut, a soft laugh swallowed quickly. Those sounds thinned as people noticed the tension and chose not to touch it. Heads dipped, eyes slid away. Safety cards became suddenly fascinating. A man in the row behind adjusted his tie as if it were too tight. A woman in a pale designer top lifted her phone, then pretended she was checking a message, her thumb hovering. Michael's smile tightened at the corners. He leaned closer, lowering his voice like he was offering confidential help. "Sir, this is our premium business section. Perhaps there has been some confusion with your booking." Premium sat in the air like a judgment, not a description. "There is no confusion," Andre said. He folded the newspaper with deliberate care, the paper crackling in the quiet. "I have a confirmed reservation for seat 3A. Here is my boarding pass." He held it out, the stiff rectangle of paper bright against his palm. Michael barely glanced at it. His eyes flicked to the seat number, then away, as if reading it would grant it authority. "I understand," he said, "but we need this seat for one of our priority customers. We will be happy to accommodate you elsewhere on the aircraft." Andre didn't raise his voice. He didn't shift into anger. He simply kept the boarding pass extended, steady as a line on a page. "I am not moving," he repeated. "This is my assigned seat." A woman a row forward whispered something to her husband, too fast to catch. The husband nodded without looking up. Another passenger watched openly, curiosity unmasked, as if this were entertainment bought with the ticket. Michael's professional veneer cracked just enough to show irritation beneath it. His jaw worked once. He straightened, reclaiming the aisle with his body. "Sir," he said, "I strongly suggest you cooperate. We have protocols for passengers who do not understand how things work here." The last word, "here," carried an invisible boundary, a line drawn by someone used to drawing them. Andre's hands rested calmly on the armrests. His shoulders stayed loose. Nothing in his posture read as a threat. Everything in it read as refusal. From the front galley came the muted clink of glass. A flight attendant's heels clicked, paused, then retreated. The cabin felt suddenly narrower, as if the air itself had stepped back to watch. Michael's fingers hovered near the crew phone clipped at his waist. He didn't touch it yet, but the motion was there, a warning that the next move would not be a conversation. Andre's gaze drifted past Michael's shoulder for a heartbeat, catching the reflection of himself in the glossy curve of a window. Simple gray shirt, dark jeans, a watch that didn't shine for attention. Nothing that signaled the kind of person this cabin imagined it served. He looked exactly like the kind of man people assumed could be moved. He looked back at Michael. "I understand how reservations work," Andre said. "This is mine." Michael exhaled through his nose, a small sound, controlled and sharp. "You are delaying our boarding process," he said, as if Andre were standing up and shouting instead of sitting quietly in the seat he had purchased. Andre didn't move. He didn't apologize. He didn't plead. The refusal remained clean and uncomplicated. Across the aisle, someone's phone camera made a soft, focusing sound, barely audible. Another screen glowed briefly, then dimmed as its owner angled it downward, trying to record without committing to being seen recording. Michael's smile returned, thinner than before, and his eyes hardened behind it. He stepped half a pace back, giving himself room, then spoke into the small silence he had created. "Security to the jet bridge," he said into his crew phone. His voice was clipped, professional, and cold. "We have a situation in business class." The word situation carried the same shape as immediately. It wasn't a description, it was a decision. Andre stayed seated. His boarding pass remained in his hand, the printed seat number crisp and undeniable. Around them, the premium cabin held its breath, leather and light and quiet colluding to pretend this was normal. Michael kept his stance in the aisle, blocking Andre's path, the way a polite gate blocks a person it has already judged. If justice stories are your thing, hit subscribe. We dive in now. Michael's thumb stayed on the crew phone a fraction too long, as if pressure alone could force the cabin back into obedience. The call ended. The line went dead. The aircraft's quiet returned, but it was the wrong kind of quiet, the kind that waited for something to break. Andre set the boarding pass on his thigh, keeping it visible. The paper's edges were sharp, freshly printed, the seat number clean and black. He didn't pocket it. He didn't hide it. He let it sit there like a small, stubborn fact. They didn't know he owned 37% of Pinnacle's parent company. Michael's gaze darted toward the front, then back to Andre, as if checking whether the cabin manager had noticed the developing problem. His smile reappeared, controlled, but it now had a brittle sheen like glass strained too thin. "Sir," he said, "this can be resolved easily if you cooperate." Andre's eyes stayed level. "It can be resolved easily if you honor the seat assignment." A few rows away, someone's knee bounced under a tailored pant leg. A man in a navy blazer flipped his safety card over, then over again, never reading a word. The smell of coffee drifted down the aisle as a flight attendant poured for someone else, the liquid whispering into a crystal glass. Then a voice cut through the cabin murmur like a blade sliding from a sheath. "Where is my seat?" The speaker stood in the aisle with the confidence of a man who believed space belonged to him. Richard Grant filled the narrow passage with a broad frame and a suit that looked engineered to announce money. The fabric was dark charcoal, crisp, unwrinkled. His cufflinks caught the light in quick flashes. A heavy watch sat on his wrist like a badge. He held an Italian leather briefcase by the handle, knuckles pale from the grip. Michael's entire demeanor changed in a single breath. "Mr. Grant," he said, voice warming into real deference, "welcome aboard. We are just sorting out a small seating issue. Your usual seat will be available momentarily." Richard's eyes swept the cabin. They landed on Andre in 3A and stayed there. Confusion crossed his face first, then something harder, something that settled into place as certainty. "This is my seat," Richard said, not to Michael but directly to Andre. It was not a question, it was a claim. Andre looked up at him calmly. The cabin lights painted a soft glow on Richard's polished shoes and the sharp crease of his trousers. Andre's own clothes absorbed the light, simple and quiet. "According to my boarding pass," Andre said, "it is mine today." Richard blinked once, thrown by the lack of fear. People usually moved when he spoke. They apologized as they did it. "There has clearly been a mistake," Richard said, turning his head toward Michael as if Andre were a piece of luggage in the wrong compartment. "I have had 3A on every Tuesday morning flight to San Francisco for the past 3 years. It is in my profile." Michael nodded quickly, eager. "Absolutely, Mr. Grant. We are working to resolve this immediately." Andre kept his hands on the armrests. His voice stayed conversational, as if discussing weather. "By resolve, you mean you expect me to move despite having a confirmed reservation for this exact seat?" Richard's jaw tightened. He finally looked at Andre properly, scanning the gray shirt, the absence of logos, the lack of visible signals he could categorize. The calm confidence seemed to irritate him more than resistance would have. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Richard asked. The question slipped out with the reflex of someone accustomed to being recognized. "I do not," Andre said. He didn't add apologies. He didn't soften it. "But I do know I purchased a ticket for this seat. I intend to stay in it." A ripple moved through the nearest rows. A woman in 2B winced, her mouth tightening. A man behind her stared harder at his safety card. The quiet attention of the cabin shifted into something like anticipation. Richard's face flushed. I have held platinum status with this airline longer than you have probably owned a suit. The insult was delivered with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It carried assumptions like luggage, heavy, careless, and familiar. Andre didn't react the way the line was designed to provoke. He didn't stiffen. He didn't shrink. He simply watched Richard, as if letting him hear himself. Michael stepped in, voice quick and soothing. Mr. Grant, please allow me to offer you seat 4A. It is identical to 3A, and I will personally ensure you receive complimentary premium wine service throughout the flight. That is not the point, Richard snapped. His voice rose, bouncing off polished surfaces. My profile clearly states 3A always. I should not have to explain this. Andre's boarding pass remained on his thigh like an answer. And my boarding pass clearly shows 3A, he said, still measured. I am not interested in special treatment. I simply expect the airline to honor what I purchased. Richard leaned slightly closer, his cologne sharp and expensive in the confined air. This is absurd, he said. I spend over $500,000 annually with Pinnacle. I sit in 3A every Tuesday. Everyone knows this. I did not, Andre replied simply. And it seems the booking system did not either. The sentence landed clean. No anger, no flourish. Just the quiet fact that the system had chosen a rule Richard could not intimidate. Richard's patience frayed. He lowered his voice, but the intensity increased, turning the aisle into a private threat performed in public. Listen carefully, he said. I do not know who you are, or what point you are trying to make, but you are about to learn a very expensive lesson about how the world actually works. Andre met his gaze without blinking. I am listening, he said. Please continue explaining how the world works. For a beat, the cabin held still. Phones hovered. Eyes widened. Even Michael paused, as if the script he had rehearsed no longer fit the situation unfolding. Then a new set of footsteps approached from the front, steady and deliberate, and Michael's shoulders eased as if rescue had arrived. Elena Martinez arrived with the calm pace of someone trained to step into conflict without showing it touch her. Her uniform was as crisp as Michael's, but the authority in her posture didn't need pleats to hold it. She stopped beside the standoff like a closing door, eyes moving once across the scene. Richard's rigid entitlement, Michael's tight smile, Andre's stillness, and then she placed her attention where she believed it mattered most. What seems to be the problem here? She asked, tone smooth, controlled. Michael's relief flashed for an instant before he buried it. We have a seating issue, he said. Mr. Grant's profile specifies Seat 3A for his regular Tuesday flights, but the system assigned it to, he glanced down, finally reading the boarding pass without touching it, Mr. Wilson. Elena's gaze flicked to Andre's face. Mr. Wilson, she said, and the words sounded correct, but not warm. Then her expression softened as she angled toward Richard. Mr. Grant, we value your loyalty immensely. I'm sure we can find a suitable accommodation. Andre didn't shift in his seat, but something in his eyes sharpened. There is no inconvenience on my part, he said. I am sitting in my assigned seat. Elena's smile held, her eyes cooled by a degree. I understand, but we do have some flexibility in our seating arrangements to accommodate our most frequent travelers. The cabin's air felt thinner. Someone's phone made a faint click as it adjusted focus. The overhead lights hummed softly, steady and indifferent. Andre's voice stayed even. Are you saying some passengers' reservations are less valid than others? Elena hesitated, just long enough to reveal she had felt the trap. Not at all, she said, smoothing it back into professionalism. We simply have protocols for resolving conflicts that prioritize our loyalty program members based on status level and travel frequency. I see, Andre said. He let the words settle. And where exactly is that policy stated when purchasing tickets? Elena's composure flickered. It is understood as part of our service model. Richard exhaled sharply, fed up with the concept of explanation. This is ridiculous, he said. I shouldn't have to stand here arguing about a seat that has practically got my name engraved on it. Michael leaned into the moment like it was evidence. Mr. Grant is a Diamond Elite member with over 5 million lifetime miles. Andre nodded once, like a man acknowledging a resume. Impressive. I respect Mr. Grant's loyalty. However, that does not override the valid reservation I made for this seat. Elena stepped slightly closer to Michael, murmuring under her breath. The words were mostly swallowed by cabin noise, but fragments leaked through. Not worth the scene. PR nightmare if he posts. Find another solution. Her eyes slid back to Andre, measuring him with an assessment that wasn't about his boarding pass. It was about what kind of problem she thought he could become. Andre noticed the measurement. He didn't react to it outwardly, but the refusal in his posture hardened, becoming less about a seat and more about the way they had decided what he was. Elena straightened. Mr. Wilson, we are prepared to offer you compensation for the inconvenience of voucher for future travel and complimentary premium services in another seat. Thank you, Andre said. I am declining. I will remain in my assigned seat. Elena's smile tightened at the corners. Sir, we are trying to find a reasonable solution here. The reasonable solution would be to honor the seat assignments your system issued, Andre said. His gaze lifted briefly toward Richard, then returned to Elena. Mr. Grant could be offered the same compensation package to take another available business class seat. Michael made a short, involuntary sound, half laugh, half disbelief before he caught himself. His face flushed with annoyance. That is not how this works, he said, and for a moment the customer service mask slipped. Andre's eyes stayed on him. Then please explain exactly how it does work, he said, because from where I am sitting, it appears that some confirmed reservations are treated as suggestions rather than contracts. A beat of silence followed, heavy with the simple fact that no answer would sound good. The only sound was the soft whir of air moving through vents and the distant clink of glassware in the galley. Elena pivoted, adjusting her approach as if changing tactics mid-negotiation. She pulled a tablet from her uniform pocket. The screen lit her face in cool blue. She tapped quickly through pages, the soft electronic clicks loud in the hush. We can offer you a complimentary upgrade on your next 3 flights, she said, regardless of fare class. Additionally, we will add 50,000 miles to your loyalty account and provide premium meal service in whichever seat you move to today. She held the tablet angled toward him, the offer displayed like proof of generosity. She looked confident, as if she had finally found the number that would buy the moment back. Andre considered it, not as temptation, but as evidence. That is generous, he said. However, this is not about compensation. Michael's patience snapped into the open. Then what is it about? He asked. We are offering you significant value here. Andre's voice stayed calm, but it carried a hard clarity that made the cabin feel even quieter. This is about being treated with the same respect as any other paying customer. He made a small gesture with his fingers, barely lifting his hand from the armrest. Would you ask any of the other passengers in business class to move because someone else preferred their seat? Elena's eyes shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing her face as she understood what the question did. It made the cabin itself a witness. It is a unique situation, she said, and the answer sounded thin even to her. Is it? Andre asked. Or does it happen again irregularly to passengers who do not look like they belong here according to someone's subjective judgment? Richard's restraint finally broke. For God's sake, he snapped, just take the miles and move. Some of us have actual business waiting in San Francisco, and some of us have principles that are not negotiable, Andre said, without raising his voice. This seat is not better than any other business class seat. The issue is being told I need to move simply because someone else wants what I legally purchased. More phones lifted, no longer pretending. A woman leaned slightly into the aisle for a better angle, eyes wide with the sense that something irreversible was happening. Elena lowered her voice, leaning in as if intimacy could pressure compliance. Mr. Wilson, she said, this is creating a difficult situation for everyone. Mr. Grant is one of our most valued customers. We have certain obligations to accommodate his preferences. And what about your obligations to me as stated in your contract of carriage when I purchased this ticket? Andre asked. Michael's face tightened. Sir, he said, you need to understand that we are trying to be reasonable here, but there are consequences to disrupting the boarding process. The threat didn't need to be explicit. It sat between them like an object placed on the tray table. Andre didn't blink. I am not disrupting anything, he said. I am sitting quietly in my assigned seat. The disruption seems to be coming from the insistence that I move despite having a valid reservation. Richard leaned down, voice dropping into a harsh whisper meant to sting. Do you know what I could do to your life with one phone call? Andre met his eyes steadily. No, he said, and that is precisely the point. Elena straightened, her tone sharpening into official firmness. Mr. Wilson, this is your final opportunity to accept our offer before we are forced to take more serious measures. Andre's expression didn't change, but the air around his seat felt colder. Such as? He asked. Elena's answer came with practiced certainty. We have protocols for passengers who refuse to comply with crew instructions. Andre nodded slowly, as if filing it away. So sitting in my assigned seat is now classified as non-compliance. Michael stepped back, jaw set, and lifted his crew phone again. The plastic clicked softly in his grip. Security to the jet bridge, he said, voice clipped and professional. We have a situation in business class. Andre's hand moved to his own phone with the same calm he had shown all along. The screen lit. A red circle appeared as he opened the recorder. I would like to document what is happening, he said, voice steady. Since it appears I am about to be removed from a flight for sitting in my assigned seat. Michael's eyes narrowed. Recording crew members is against our policy? Andre didn't argue emotionally. He spoke like someone who had read what others only claimed. I reviewed your policies before booking, he said. There is no prohibition against recording one's own interactions in a public space such as this cabin. The red recording timer began to count upward, bright and undeniable. In the front galley, a drawer slid shut with a soft thud. The cabin manager's tablet screen dimmed. Richard's watch face gleamed as he checked the time again, impatient and certain the next step would restore the world to its usual shape. Andre remained seated, hands visible, recorder running, while the aisle around him tightened into a corridor of consequences. Boots sounded on the forward threshold before anyone fully appeared, the rhythm heavier than the cabin's usual soft-footed choreography. A pair of broad shoulders filled the entryway, then another. The air shifted with them, faint cologne, nylon, and the cold outside smell that clung to uniforms fresh from the jet bridge. Daniel Hoffman stepped into the premium cabin with the practiced neutrality of a man who spent his life walking into other people's problems. He was tall, solid, eyes scanning quickly for hands, faces, movement. Two uniformed officers flanked him, their presence quiet but heavy, radios clipped and silent for now. Daniel's gaze landed on Andre first, seated, hands visible, posture still. Then he looked to Elena and Michael. What is the situation? Daniel asked, voice level. Michael stepped forward as if he had been waiting for the cue. This passenger is refusing to comply with crew instructions regarding seating arrangements, he said, gesturing toward Andre without looking at him. We cannot delay departure. Daniel turned his head slightly, giving Andre a direct line of sight. Sir, he said, the flight crew has authority over all seating assignments. If they have asked you to change seats, you need to comply. The words were standard. The tone was not unkind. But the assumption underneath was clear. The crew had spoken, therefore the passenger must be wrong. Andre's phone screen glowed faintly near his thigh. The recording timer ran on, numbers ticking upward in red. He didn't wave it around. He didn't use it like a threat. It simply existed, quietly capturing everything. That is not entirely accurate, Andre said evenly. The crew has authority to reassign seats for operational safety or balance issues. None of those apply here. I have a confirmed reservation for seat 3A. I am being asked to move solely because another passenger wants my seat. Daniel's brow tightened a fraction. He glanced at Elena without turning his body fully, the way someone checks a detail before stepping into it. Elena's smile returned, careful. It is a bit more complicated, she said, choosing words like stepping stones. Mr. Grant is a Diamond Elite member with a seating preference in his profile. Richard made a sound of impatience near the aisle, a short exhale meant to be heard. Daniel's eyes returned to Andre. Sir, while I understand your position, if you refuse to comply with crew instructions, we would need to remove you from the aircraft. Andre nodded once, acknowledging the protocol without surrendering to it. I understand that is your process, he said. Before we proceed, I would like to clarify something. Am I being removed because I have violated any regulation, or because I am refusing to give up my legally purchased seat to another passenger based on his status level? The question was simple, but it cut the situation down to its bones. The cabin seemed to lean toward it. A few phones lifted higher. Someone's camera adjusted focus with a soft click. Daniel held the silence for a beat, eyes narrowing, not at Andre but at the shape of the problem. He was being asked to enforce preference, as if it were law. Richard stepped in, voice edged with contempt. "This is absurd," he said. "I have never experienced such poor service. I will be speaking with Robert about this entire debacle." The casual use of a first name wasn't subtle. It was a reminder, meant to intimidate. Elena's eyes flicked to Daniel as if to say, "You see what we're dealing with." From several rows back, a woman rose. She moved with hesitation that turned into resolve mid-step, as if each footfall was a decision. Her pinnacle ID hung from a lanyard against her sweater off-duty, but unmistakably crew. Sofia Ramirez stopped a few feet from the group. Her face was pale with nerves, but her voice was steady. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I'm off-duty. Crew, maybe I can help." Michael's head snapped toward her, irritation flashing hot through his professional mask. "This does not concern you," he said. "Return to your seat." Sophia didn't retreat. She swallowed once, throat bobbing, then spoke again. "I think we are overlooking something important. Our policy manual explicitly states that confirmed seat assignments can only be changed for operational safety or balance requirements. Passenger status preference is not listed as a valid reason for involuntary reassignment." The words didn't sound dramatic. They sounded documented. Daniel shifted, attention locking on to Sophia now. "Is that accurate?" he asked, and his tone changed, less enforcement, more verification. Elena's expression tightened. The corners of her mouth held, but the skin around her eyes pinched. "Our protocols," she began. Daniel raised a hand slightly, stopping the momentum. "I need a clear answer," he said, "because I cannot remove a passenger who is not violating a regulation." Michael's face darkened. "Sophia," he said sharply, "this is not your flight." Sophia's shoulders tensed, but she held her ground. Her fingers curled around the edge of her lanyard as if anchoring herself. "It is still our policy," she said, "and he has a confirmed boarding pass." Andre watched her with quiet recognition. He didn't nod dramatically. He didn't speak over her. He simply stayed still, letting her words land without turning them into a performance. Phones were no longer discreet. A woman in the forward rows openly recorded, elbows tucked in, eyes wide. A man across the aisle whispered to someone beside him, then stopped whispering when he realized the microphone on his own phone was probably catching it. Daniel's radio crackled once, then went silent again. He looked from Sophia to Elena, then to Andre. The cabin's lighting reflected off the tablet in Elena's hand, the screen now dim, as if it had lost confidence too. Andre spoke again, voice calm, controlled. "I have no desire to create a scene or delay this flight," he said. "I want to be treated with the same respect as any other passenger who purchased a seat on this aircraft." Daniel exhaled slowly, as if choosing the only viable path left. "Let me make some calls," he said. He stepped back toward the front, turning slightly so his body blocked his phone as he dialed. The officers beside him stayed put, scanning faces, shifting their weight, waiting. In the pause, the premium cabin felt strangely exposed. Like the invisible rules had been pulled into the light, and now everyone could see how flimsy they were. Sophia remained where she stood, hands still, jaw set. Michael avoided looking at her. Andre's recorder continued to run, red numbers climbing, capturing the small sounds that mattered. The muted ding of a call connecting, the soft rustle of clothing as people leaned forward, the faint hum of the aircraft holding its breath while the system tried to decide whose voice counted. Thomas kept his voice low, angled toward Andre as if privacy could still be manufactured in a cabin full of cameras. "Mr. Wilson," he said, "we can discuss your concerns after we resolve the immediate matter." "The immediate matter is resolved," Andre replied. "I am in my assigned seat." Thomas's jaw tightened. The executive smile returned, thinner now, the kind that worked better in boardrooms than in aisles. He turned slightly toward Richard, who stood rigid with offended disbelief, and then back to Andre, weighing optics against habit. Andre's phone vibrated once against his palm, subtle, but enough to draw his eye. He glanced down, not hurried, just efficient. On the screen, a message sat in a clean, clipped line. Protocol 7, in progress. Documentation active. Stand by for timeline. A timestamp glowed beside it, precise and undeniable. Andre locked the screen without flourish, but the movement had an almost mechanical calm to it, as if this moment had been rehearsed in a different life. He slid the phone back into his hand, the recorder still running, red timer climbing. Thomas noticed the glance. His eyes flicked toward Andre's phone, then to the nearest passengers filming. A muscle in his cheek jumped. He looked at Elena, who looked at Michael, and the three of them shared the same silent calculation. The cabin was no longer theirs. Richard broke the tension with a sharp breath. "This is unbelievable," he muttered, as if disbelief could reverse reality. "I'm being punished for loyalty." Thomas pivoted quickly, stepping into the role he knew best. "Mr. Grant," he said, voice soothed into corporate empathy, "we appreciate your loyalty. Allow me to offer you seat 1A today. Extra legroom, complimentary champagne service, and a voucher for future travel." Richard's eyes narrowed. He wanted 3A like a trophy, but the cameras made trophies dangerous. He glanced around and caught the lenses pointed toward him. His shoulders shifted, the arrogance recalibrating into self-preservation. "Fine," he snapped, "but this is unacceptable." Thomas nodded, already moving to escort him. Elena followed half a step behind, tablet tucked tight, her expression fixed. As Richard finally moved down the aisle, a small current of breath passed through the cabin relief, from people who wanted the conflict over, and disappointment from those who sensed it had only changed shape. Andre remained seated, outwardly calm, but his attention sharpened. He watched Michael avoid looking in his direction, watched Elena check on Richard with quick, eager steps, watched Thomas lean toward Richard as if apologizing for the inconvenience of fairness. The cabin resumed its motions, bags pushed under seats, latches clicking, murmured calls to assistants and spouses. But the pattern of service had changed. It always did when embarrassment entered the room. Andre's phone vibrated again. Another message arrived, short and coded, the kind designed to be read in a glance. "If any move is made, log names. Capture audio. Hold position." Andre's thumb hovered for a second, then tapped out a single reply. "Understood." He slid the phone into his palm again, the screen dark, his recorder still quietly counting time. Then he turned his head toward the window. Outside, the morning light washed the wing in pale gold. The aircraft sat still, but the world beyond it moved, baggage carts rolling, a ground crew member in a neon vest walking beneath the engine housing. For a moment, everything looked normal. Then Andre saw it. A thin streak near the left engine housing, catching sunlight with an oily amber sheen. It wasn't water. It didn't bead like condensation. It lay in a line that looked too deliberate, too heavy, like a wound that had started to run. Andre's chest tightened, not fear, not yet, but recognition, the kind that came from experience and pattern. He pressed the call button. A soft chime sounded above him. Footsteps approached, measured and reluctant. Michael appeared at Andre's shoulder, his expression professionally distant, eyes slightly narrowed as if expecting another complaint. "Yes," Michael said, tone clipped. Andre nodded toward the window. "There appears to be fluid leaking near the left engine housing," he said quietly. "It might be worth having maintenance check before takeoff." Michael leaned just enough to glance out, barely moving his head. His eyes flicked over the wing and returned to Andre with practiced dismissal. "That is normal condensation, sir," he said. "Nothing to worry about." Andre didn't argue the way most passengers did, louder, emotional, pleading. He stayed calm, and that calm made the words sharper. "I have flown over 8 million miles, Andre said. "That does not look like condensation to me. The color and viscosity suggest hydraulic fluid." Michael's face tightened. The muscles near his mouth pulled, as if resisting a reaction. "I will make a note of it," he said, the phrase sounding like a box checked rather than an action taken. He turned away before Andre could respond. moving down the aisle with quick, controlled steps. Andre watched him go, then looked back at the wing. The streak remained, faint but distinct. A line of amber against metal, quiet and indifferent to status, policy, or pride. Andre's phone vibrated once more. He pulled it up, the screen lighting his fingers in cool blue. He opened his messages and typed with steady precision. Possible maintenance issue identified. Crew dismissive. Documenting timeline. He hit send. The aircraft hum continued, steady and confident, while outside the window the thin amber line caught the light again, and Andre held his gaze on it as if holding a thread that might unravel everything. The cabin door sealed with a soft, final thud, followed by the muted clack of the latch engaging. The sound was ordinary, but in that moment it felt like a decision made without everyone's consent. The overhead bins were shut. Seatbelts clicked. A last pair of footsteps hurried down the aisle, then stopped. Andre kept his eyes on the wing. The amber streak was still there, and it looked thicker now, less like a line and more like a smear. The sunlight caught it and made it shine in a way that water never did. It had weight. It clung. He pressed the call button again. The chime sounded small under the aircraft's steady ventilation hum. This time Elena arrived, her expression guarded, professionalism stretched thin by the morning's chaos. She leaned slightly toward Andre's window, careful not to let her body block the aisle for too long. "How can I help you, Mr. Wilson?" she asked, and the use of his name now carried a different temperature than before. Andre nodded toward the glass. "I'm still concerned about that fluid near the left engine housing," he said. "It's expanding. It looks like hydraulic fluid." Elena looked. For a second, her face did not move. Then something in her eyes shifted focus. Calculation, the quick mental turn from customer dispute to potential operational risk. The amber patch had spread enough now that it could no longer be dismissed as imagination. "I will have the captain informed," she said, and the words came out more serious than her smile. She moved forward briskly, heels clicking, tablet pressed to her side. Andre watched her disappear toward the front, then returned his gaze to the wing. The patch glinted again, brighter, as if the aircraft itself were trying to warn them. A few moments later, the intercom crackled. A breath. Then the captain's voice filled the cabin, calm, professional, practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have been notified of a potential maintenance concern that we need to verify before departure. This is strictly precautionary, but safety is our absolute priority. Our mechanics will perform a brief inspection. We appreciate your patience." The reaction rolled through the premium cabin like a low wave. A sigh from someone who checked a watch. A quiet curse swallowed. A woman pushed her hair behind her ear with a sharp motion, annoyed but trying not to look annoyed. A man in a suit typed quickly on his phone, shoulders tense. The scent of coffee turned stale in the paused air. From seat 1A, Richard's head turned sharply toward Andre. His eyes narrowed, and in them sat an accusation that didn't need words. Retaliation. Andre didn't look back. He stared at the wing, the patch still shining. Minutes stretched. The aircraft remained still. The hum of ventilation never changed, but it began to feel like the only thing moving. Then, the front door opened again. A gust of colder air slipped into the cabin, carrying the smell of tarmac, rubber, fuel, and morning damp. A man in a maintenance jacket stepped inside, broad-shouldered, face lined with focus. He carried a tablet and a small flashlight. His eyes scanned quickly, not for status, but for the problem. James Parker moved down the aisle with purpose. Elena hovered a few steps behind him, posture tight. When he reached Andre's row, he leaned slightly toward him, voice quiet. "Sir," he said, "could you show me exactly what you noticed?" Andre pointed through the glass. "It started as a thin line," he said. "About 40 minutes ago. It's been expanding. The color and viscosity suggest hydraulic fluid, possibly from the aileron control system, based on its location." James's eyebrows rose, not in disbelief, but in recognition. He angled his head, studying the patch carefully, then turned on the flashlight and aimed it toward the area, watching how the light reflected. He leaned closer to the window, eyes narrowing. "You're right," James said after a beat. His voice stayed low, but the seriousness in it was unmistakable. "That's hydraulic fluid." Elena's breath caught. "Is it serious?" she asked, trying to keep her tone even. James didn't soften the answer. Serious enough that this aircraft is not flying today. The words landed like a sudden drop in altitude. The cabin, still holding irritation over delay, shifted into a colder awareness. James stepped back, already moving mentally through checklists. "We need to deplane immediately and swap aircraft," he said, voice firm now. He looked at Elena. "This is a Class 2 fluid leak affecting critical control surfaces." Elena's professional composure cracked, just slightly, like a hairline fracture. "If it had gone unnoticed," she began. James didn't finish the sentence either. He didn't need to. His face did it for him. Andre's fingers tightened once on the armrest. For the first time that morning, a tremor threatened the edge of his calm. Not because of humiliation. Because the line outside the window had just changed meaning. If he had moved, if he had been pushed to another seat, if his view of the wing had shifted by a few feet, the thought hit him like a quiet punch. His throat tightened. His hands, so steady through pressure and threats, trembled slightly before he forced them still. The intercom crackled again. The captain's voice returned, now carrying a heavier formality. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have confirmed a maintenance issue that requires further attention. For your safety, we will be deplaning the aircraft while a replacement is prepared. We apologize for the inconvenience and appreciate your cooperation." The cabin erupted into movement. Seatbelts unlatched in rapid clicks. Overhead bins popped open. Bags slid out with soft thumps. People stood too quickly, bumping shoulders, the narrow aisle filling with frustrated bodies and loud, restless breathing. But something else moved through the chaos glances. Looks thrown toward Andre, then away, then back again. Not everyone understood the details, but enough had seen the sequence to connect the dots. The man who had been treated like a problem had just been right about something that mattered. Richard stood near the front, stiff with anger, but the anger didn't look clean anymore. It looked exposed. He avoided the phones now, turning his face slightly away as people filed past him. Thomas Bradford reappeared in the aisle, expression no longer polished. He moved toward Andre with urgency, threading through passengers grabbing bags. "Mr. Wilson," Thomas said, voice low, "I want to personally thank you for your vigilance. Maintenance confirms that leak could have become critical during flight." Andre stood slowly, careful with the motion, letting others squeeze past. "I'm glad it was identified before takeoff," he said. Then he added quietly with a bluntness that didn't need volume, "I'm concerned it was initially dismissed." Thomas's eyes tightened. "That is troubling," he said. The words sounded like obligation, but his face showed discomfort that was closer to fear. James Parker stepped forward again, tablet in hand, and spoke to Elena and Thomas with the same unfiltered clarity. "This is exactly why we train crews to take passenger observations seriously," he said. "Sometimes they're the only ones who might notice a developing issue." Andre watched Elena's expression shift as if the sentence had struck a nerve she didn't want to admit existed. Passengers streamed off the plane, the jetway swallowing them in a line of rolling wheels and clipped complaints. The premium cabin emptied, leaving behind the smell of disturbed air and the faint imprint of pressure. Andre paused at the doorway and looked back once more through the window at the wing. The amber stain still shone in the sunlight, indifferent and undeniable. It wasn't just a leak. It was proof. The gate area swelled with displaced passengers and restless energy, a loose crowd orbiting the customer service desk like storm debris. Rolling suitcases rattled over tile. Screens overhead flipped from "on time" to "delayed," the letters harsh in bright white. Every few seconds a phone chimed texts, calendar alerts, missed calls, each one a tiny reminder that schedules didn't care why the plane had stopped. Andre stood off to the side with Thomas Bradford, near a gray column that blocked them from the main flow. Thomas kept checking his own phone, thumb scrolling, eyes tightening with each new update. Andre's posture stayed calm, but his attention moved constantly, faces, devices, angles, the way people leaned toward drama when it was safe to watch. A uniformed officer approached from the concourse, then another. Behind them, Michael Reynolds appeared, not leading, but close enough to be heard. His face had a strained brightness, like someone forcing confidence into place. Thomas's head lifted, his shoulders squared. "What is this?" he asked before they even reached him. The lead officer stopped at a polite distance. "Mr. Bradford," he began, "we received a report of a passenger making false claims about aircraft safety to disrupt operations. We need statements." Thomas stared, stunned. Then his eyes flicked to James Parker's maintenance team visible through the terminal glass, still clustered around the grounded aircraft. "That is completely inaccurate," Thomas said, voice sharp now. "Maintenance confirmed the leak. The aircraft was pulled." Michael stepped forward, a half-step too bold, as if he was trying to reclaim a narrative. "It escalated after a seating dispute," he said, pointing toward Andre without looking at him. "It appears retaliatory. A delay tactic." Andre didn't react the way Michael seemed to expect. He didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He simply turned his phone in his hand so the screen faced upward and unlocked it with a steady thumb. The red recording timer was still there, long past the point of being a moment. It had become a record. Andre looked at the officer. "The maintenance log will confirm that James Parker classified the issue as a Class 2 hydraulic leak affecting critical control surfaces," he said calmly. "That is an objective fact, not a passenger claim." The officer hesitated, eyes moving between Thomas's executive composure and Michael's insistence. "Sir," he said to Andre, "we need you to come with us to the security office." Andre's gaze stayed level. "Am I being detained?" "Not at this time," the officer said, cautious. "Then I am declining to leave this area," Andre replied. "I have done nothing wrong, and the maintenance records will support what I reported." A few passengers nearby slowed, sensing a second confrontation forming. Phones rose automatically, as if the crowd's reflexes had already been trained by the earlier scene. A woman with a coffee cup stopped mid-sip. A man with a laptop bag angled his camera discreetly and then gave up on discreet. Michael's expression tightened, the desperation showing through the polish. "This is an internal airline matter," he said, trying to push the moment back behind a curtain. "It's not," a voice cut in. Maria Gonzalez stepped forward from the crowd, shoulders squared, eyes bright with anger that didn't waver. She pointed past the officer toward the grounded aircraft visible outside. "I was on that plane," she said. "I watched what happened. He was treated horribly, and then he spotted something your crew dismissed. You're not turning him into the problem now." The officer blinked. "Ma'am?" "No," Maria said louder, and several heads turned toward her. "You don't get to do that. Not when we all saw it." Another passenger moved closer, an older man with a cane, face creased by years and a kind of exhausted clarity. He looked at Andre, then at Michael. "I've been flying for 50 years, he said. "I've seen people treated like they don't belong. Thank you for standing your ground." A middle-aged woman nodded beside him. "My son goes through this all the time," she added. "People need to see it." The crowd thickened. The air filled with overlapping murmurs, the low thrum of outrage building. Michael's eyes darted from phone to phone, realizing the story he was trying to write was being overwritten in real time. Thomas stepped forward, voice firm. "There will be no security involvement here," he said, placing himself between Andre and the officers. Maintenance confirmed the issue. "Mr. Wilson is not going anywhere." One officer glanced at the other, then back at Thomas. The situation had shifted. It wasn't just a passenger dispute anymore. It was public, recorded, and escalating. Michael's face drained slightly. "Mr. Wilson?" he repeated under his breath, as if hearing the name differently this time. Andre didn't offer clarification yet. He simply lifted his phone a few inches and tapped the screen. The recorder interface filled it, time-stamped, running, undeniable. He turned it slightly so the closest officer could see the red timer and the waveform, proof that the entire attempt to reframe him had been captured. "There's no need for anyone to improvise," Andre said calmly. "Everything that happened is documented." The officers backed off by a fraction, their posture loosening. They weren't retreating in defeat. They were choosing not to be the next clip. Michael tried once more, voice strained. "This is getting out of hand." "It already is," someone muttered from the crowd, and a few people laughed short, bitter laughs with no humor in them. Andre looked at the faces around him. Frustrated travelers, curious bystanders, people who had been silent earlier and were no longer comfortable with silence. He felt the weight of it not as applause, but as responsibility. He could end it by staying quiet and letting executives handle damage control. Or he could make the truth unavoidable while the cameras were already rolling. His phone vibrated again. He glanced down. Protocol 7 ready. If you speak, speak clean. Names, facts, no speeches. Andre slipped the phone back into his palm and stepped forward into the open space the crowd unconsciously made for him. The noise softened, then fell away, as if everyone's devices had turned into a single shared ear. He stood still for a beat, letting the silence settle. Then he spoke, voice steady, carrying without force. "My name is Andre Wilson," he said. "I am the founder and CEO of Wilson Global Investments." The reaction rippled through the crowd, gasps, whispers, quick taps as people searched the name, eyes widening as results appeared on screens. Andre didn't wait for the buzz to fade completely. He continued, each sentence measured. "Wilson Global owns 37% of Pinnacle's outstanding shares," he said. "We are the largest single shareholder." Thomas's face tightened, not with surprise he already knew, but with the realization of what public confirmation meant. Near the customer service desk, Richard Grant froze mid-step, color shifting in his face as he processed the name. His body angled away from the crowd instinctively, as if distance could erase footage. Andre's gaze moved briefly across the group, then landed on Michael, who stood at the edge of the circle, suddenly small without his aisle. "I boarded as a passenger," Andre said, "not as a title." He paused just long enough for the phones to hold the moment. "And today," he added, calm as steel, "Pinnacle showed everyone exactly how it treats people when it doesn't recognize them." The crowd didn't disperse after Andre spoke. If anything, it tightened, people pressing closer in a half circle of raised screens. The airport around them kept moving, boarding calls in the distance, wheels rattling, a child crying somewhere near a snack kiosk, but the space at the gate felt sealed off, held in place by attention. Thomas Bradford stood beside Andre with the stiff posture of someone realizing he had stepped into a story bigger than corporate containment. His phone buzzed repeatedly against his palm, the screen flashing names and missed calls. He didn't answer. He couldn't. Every decision now had a camera. Reporters began to arrive in twos and threes, drawn by the same clips passengers had already posted. One shoved a microphone forward, breathless with urgency. "Mr. Wilson, did you ground the flight because of the seat dispute?" Andre didn't look at the microphone. He looked past it at the grounded aircraft through the terminal windows, maintenance lights reflecting off the metal. "The aircraft was grounded because it wasn't safe to fly," he said evenly. "The rest is context." Another reporter turned toward Richard. "Mr. Grant, is it true you demanded another passenger seat despite a valid reservation?" Richard's face tightened as if he'd been slapped. He raised a hand to block lenses, shoulder angling away. "No comment," he muttered, pushing through bodies with an urgency that wasn't confidence. Cameras tracked him anyway. The attempt to disappear only made him more visible. Michael Reynolds stood near the periphery, eyes darting, his mouth slightly open as if he'd forgotten how to breathe normally. The earlier authority in his stance had evaporated. Now he looked like a man watching the ground collapse beneath a script he had trusted. Thomas's phone finally rang in a way that cut through the noise, an executive ringtone, loud and insistent. He glanced down and his face tightened. He stepped a few feet away, turning his body as if privacy still existed. "Yes," he said. His expression shifted as he listened. The muscles at his jaw clenched. He glanced back at Andre, then at the crowd, then toward the windows where the grounded aircraft sat like a public exhibit. "Understood," Thomas said. "I'll tell him." He ended the call and returned, moving as if gravity had increased. "Robert Lawson is on his way," Thomas said quietly to Andre. "He's flying in personally." Andre's gaze stayed steady. "Good," Thomas swallowed. He ordered a fleet-wide grounding for immediate safety inspections. All aircraft. The words landed like a shockwave. People nearby reacted in real time, gasps, incredulous murmurs, rapid typing. Somewhere in the terminal, a news alert pinged out loud from a phone speaker. "Breaking Pinnacle Airlines suspends operations." A woman near the back whispered, "All of them?" as if the idea was too large to fit inside her day. Andre's face didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "If one report was dismissed today," he said, "then the system that dismissed it can dismiss others." Thomas's shoulders sank slightly, as if the truth physically weighed him down. "Robert wants to meet you immediately when he arrives," he said. He cleared his schedule. Andre nodded once. His phone vibrated in his palm again. He glanced down. Meeting confirmed. Prepare Plan A materials. Log all names, times, locations. He locked the screen and looked back up. The crowd's energy had shifted from outrage to anticipation. People weren't just watching a confrontation anymore. They were watching power collide with documentation. Thomas stepped forward, facing the cameras with a controlled inhale. He lifted both hands slightly, palms open, a gesture designed to calm. "On behalf of Pinnacle Airlines," he began, voice carrying, "I want to acknowledge that what happened today was unacceptable. We are taking immediate action." Andre didn't interrupt. He let Thomas speak, let the corporate phrasing try to take shape. Thomas continued, "Including a fleet-wide safety inspection and a comprehensive review of our customer treatment protocols." The phrasing was careful, but the cameras wanted specifics. A reporter pushed forward. "Will anyone be held accountable?" Thomas's eyes flicked to Michael for a fraction of a second, too quick to be deliberate, too obvious to be invisible. Andre stepped in, not to seize the stage, but to stop the narrative from turning into a performance. He raised his phone slightly, not as a threat, but as a reminder that accountability already existed in digital form. "Accountability starts with facts," Andre said. "Names, actions, timelines, not slogans." A hush settled again, the kind of hush that made every syllable feel heavier. Thomas nodded, the discomfort visible. "Mr. Wilson is correct," he said. "This will be documented and addressed through formal process." Michael swallowed hard. His hands flexed at his sides as if he wanted to reach for something, his crew phone, his badge. A script, but none of it could protect him now. Andre turned slightly toward him, not in anger, in clarity. "Mr. Reynolds," Andre said. Michael flinched as if his name had been shouted. It wasn't. It was spoken calmly, which somehow made it worse. Andre's gaze held him. "Your actions today reflected a culture that rewards certain assumptions," he said, voice measured. "You are not the whole problem. You are proof of it." Michael's face tightened, eyes glassy with shock and something like shame. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. In the background, a large screen near a coffee shop flashed updated flight information. Pinnacle flights flipping to "canceled" in quick succession, like dominoes. A man in a suit stared at the board as if reading a disaster report. Thomas's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, then looked back at Andre. "Robert will be here in under 3 hours," he said. "He wants to speak with you and your team directly." Andre nodded. "Then we will be ready." The reporters leaned in again. "Mr. Wilson," someone called, "are you going to sell your stake? Are you going to fire leadership?" Andre didn't take the bait. "This isn't about punishment," he said, and his voice stayed level even as the terminal buzzed around them. "It's about making sure this never happens to someone without a platform." His phone vibrated once more. A final message flashed on screen before he locked it. "Plan A ready if response is inadequate." Andre slipped the phone away and looked toward the windows where mechanics still moved around the aircraft, their reflective vests catching light in sharp flashes. The story was no longer contained to a gate. It had reached the entire fleet. The replacement aircraft arrived with none of the earlier ceremony. No champagne trays, no bright smiles. Just a steady flow of passengers reboarding under the weight of a day that had already turned historic. By the time the new flight finally pushed back, the terminal televisions were running the story on loop. A shaky clip of the aisle standoff. A still frame of the amber streak on the wing. A headline in bold letters that didn't need details to feel dangerous. Pinnacle Ground's entire fleet for inspections. Andre boarded last, not because he needed space, but because he wanted quiet. He walked down the jetway in the same plain shirt, the same dark jeans, the same unbranded backpack. No entourage, no announcement. Only the soft squeak of his shoes against the rubber floor and the low hum of the aircraft ahead. He didn't turn left this time. He took the aisle toward economy. The cabin smelled different back here, recycled air and warm plastic, faint citrus cleaner, the sharp sweetness of someone's perfume caught in fabric. Overhead bins thumped shut. A child kicked a seat somewhere behind him. the normal chaos of regular travel, unchanged by corporate panic. Andre reached his row and paused. Maria Gonzalez was already there, seated by the window, hands folded around her phone. When she looked up and saw him, her eyes widened, then softened into a tired smile. "You're really sitting back here?" she said, voice low. Andre slid into the aisle seat beside her, placing his backpack under the seat in front with the same careful, unhurried motion he'd used all day. "I sit where I sit," he replied. The point was never the cabin. Maria let out a short breath that sounded like relief. "People keep acting like you want a seat." Andre buckled his belt. The latch clicked, clean and final. "A seat isn't a prize," he said. "It's a contract, and dignity shouldn't be negotiable." The plane taxied slowly, engines rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Outside the window, a row of Pinnacle aircraft sat parked in the distance, silent, grounded, ringed by maintenance vehicles like an emergency perimeter. The sight was surreal, like a city holding its breath. A flight attendant moved down the aisle in economy, stopping for a passenger who raised a hand. She leaned in, listened, nodded, and wrote something on a small notepad. Her tone stayed respectful, even unhurried. No impatience, no suspicion, just procedure. A few rows ahead, a man pointed toward his window and spoke to another attendant, his face worried. The attendant didn't dismiss him. She crouched slightly, looked where he pointed, and thanked him before stepping forward toward the front of the cabin. Maria watched it happen, then glanced at Andre. "They're different already," she whispered. "Different under pressure," Andre said. "The question is who they are when the cameras are gone." His phone vibrated once. He didn't pull it out right away. He felt the vibration, let it pass, then waited until the cabin noise covered the small motion of retrieving it. A message sat on the screen from Diana Foster. "Robert Lawson accepts terms. Oversight committee scheduled. Michael Reynolds placed on leave. Thomas suspended pending review." Andre's thumb hovered for a second. He locked the phone and slid it away. Maria studied his face. "Is it over?" Andre looked forward, toward the thin line of the aisle stretching to the cockpit, toward the place where decisions were made out of sight. "It started," he said. The plane lifted, the ground falling away in a gentle tilt. For a moment, the cabin went quiet the way it always did during ascent, breaths held, bodies still, a shared instinct to respect physics. Andre turned his head slightly and looked out the window. The wing cut through pale sky, clean metal catching sunlight. No amber streak, no warning line, just the steady shape of flight. Maria followed his gaze. "You think about what could have happened?" Andre's jaw tightened once, the smallest tell. "I think about how close it came," he said, "and how many times someone else gets ignored." The seatbelt sign chimed off with a soft ding. Conversation returned in pockets. A snack bag crinkled. A laptop opened with a small click. Normal life reassembled itself around them, as if the system hadn't just been forced to look in a mirror. Andre sat still, hands resting on his thighs, posture calm. No victory pose, no satisfaction. Only the quiet focus of someone who understood that the most dangerous problems weren't the loud ones. They were the ones people had learned to dismiss. Outside, the clouds thickened, swallowing the ground and turning the world into white silence. Andre didn't look away. Somewhere in that silence, the baseline shifted. Dignity isn't an upgrade.